The Bengals have officially hired 3 new members to their personnel department, and in this video, I'll explain how one of them can help Cincinnati gain an edge in an area they desperately need. Hi again, Bengals fans. John Sheeran of A to Z Sports Cincinnati here. We're catching up on some news that happened kind of earlier this month, but the Bengals officially confirmed the hiring of 3 new members to the team's player personnel department. And those 3 hires are 2 scouts in Josh Finch and Tyler Ramsey, and a scouting research assistant in Trey Brown. Now, when other teams make additions to their personnel department, it's kind of a nothing burger, right? Scouting departments have become so expansive around the NFL, ranging from anywhere between a dozen to 2 dozen, and even more so under the entire umbrella that is the player personnel department. But as many in Cincinnati know, that's not how the Bengals roll. Underneath Director of Player Personnel Duke Tobin, who's basically the team's de facto general manager, there are only a handful of scouts on staff, and one of those scouts, in Christian Sarkisian, he left his position last month to take a promotion to become the new general manager for Northwestern Athletics. And when one scout leaves the Bengals, it's the equivalent of about 4 to 5 other scouts leaving another team. Now, Tobin and the Bengals will say that they like to keep everything very tight-knit because they want everyone's voices to be heard, and they want to have a lot of trust within that specific part of the team, so when they're going through information and they're making decisions, they know that it's coming from a worthwhile place. Of course, the perception is, less people to pay, cheaper operations. And I do think the answer is somewhere in the middle. Whenever the Bengals' frugality comes into question, I never really question it, but I do think there is value in having minimal voices a part of this process in terms of getting trusted, verified information. But as the margins get thinner and thinner around the league, and everyone is basically using the same data as we get more and more years of sample size worth of whether or not it's actually worthwhile, I do think it's important to start winning at those margins by getting more information at your disposal. Which is why I think the Bounty hire is very interesting, because he's the latest, maybe the only addition that the Bengals have ever had since hiring Sam Francis back in 2019 as the director of football research. It's also kind of cool that, like Francis back in 2019, Bounty comes originally from the Buffalo Bills, or that's where the last NFL team he worked for, and he was a football analytics intern. And at least on the surface, it doesn't look that this hire specifically had anything to do with the departure of Sarkisian. Because if you hire 2 scouts after you lose 1, you're obviously adding a net positive in terms of labor in that specific department. The addition of what is essentially an analytics assistant, I think that's a completely independent decision that the Bengals made. Now again, Sarkisian was just one of a handful of scouts in this entire department, so I think his responsibilities range far beyond just scouting players. But nonetheless, to hire someone with this specific title, I think it does send a message that they are trying to expand this specific department of the entire scouting department. And on a related note, I think that it was notable that this offseason, Trey Brown, who is a senior personnel executive for Cincinnati, he got multiple looks to become a GM for an NFL team this offseason. I think some within Paycor Stadium realized that Brown is a rising star in this industry, and it's very likely that in the near future, they could lose him as well. And Brown didn't start out as an executive for the Bengals, obviously. He started out as a scout and was quickly promoted to that position. And I think adding to the scouting department below him is a way of almost kind of preparing for the future when Brown eventually does leave. Make no mistake about it, this is still the smallest scouting department in the entire NFL, and there's still plenty of grounds for it to expand even more than it already is. But I will say, I am pleasantly surprised that the Bengals made it official to hire 3 new members of the personnel department after losing just 1. It's a small step, but it's a step nonetheless.